Good morning, everybody, and welcome. I want to thank you for joining us today. We're going to talk about COVID-19 funding update, the payroll protection program, and legislative changes. I'm Janet Robb, President and CEO of the Better Business Bureau serving Arkansas, and I'm really glad you joined us today. I want a special thank you sent to those who are presenting today, the Small Business Administration, Arkansas District Office, and the law firm Friday, Eldredge Clark. Throughout Arkansas and the world, we've all been learning new ways to interact and do business over the past year. As businesses like yours continue to take on new challenges, the Better Business Bureau is here to help provide accurate information and resources that will help you join us in our efforts to build trust in the marketplace. We know there are a lot of questions about the new COVID-19 funding for businesses. We encourage you to type your questions during the presentation today in the chat box. We will try to answer many of those during the question and answer session. We will also send out follow-up information about upcoming webinars and follow-up information addressing the questions that we may not get to during our event today. If you have specific questions regarding your situation, we encourage you to contact the Small Business Administration directly. We're thrilled to have representatives today from the Arkansas District of the Small Business Administration, as well as attorneys from Friday, Eldredge Clark. So today, we're going to talk about the SBA COVID-19 legislation overview. Friday, Eldredge Clark will give us a payroll protection program overview, and also most importantly, the forgiveness section of that. And then we'll have a Q&A session. So from the Small Business Administration this morning, we have Edward Haddock. Mr. Haddock is the District Director for the Arkansas District Office of the U.S. Small Business Administration. His SBA career began in the New Jersey District Office, and then he was promoted to serve as Senior Area Manager in Northwest Arkansas, and quickly moved up the ranks to Deputy Director and then Director of the Arkansas District. Mr. Haddock earned an MBA from Rutgers University and served 12 years on active duty with the U.S. Air Force, including positions as Flight Chief, Instructor, and Flying Crew Chief, working in over 32 countries, supporting both humanitarian and combat operations. So Edward, from all of us, thank you for your service. Thank you for joining us, and I'll now turn it over to you.
Great, thank you so much, Janet. I want to thank you and Tina both for the invite here, as well as the Better Business Bureau for giving us a platform to reach so many needed entrepreneurs, small businesses, nonprofits, and eligible applicants during this incredible time that we're all dealing with. Also, thank you to Friday, Eldredge Clark for being on, and it's always good to have an attorney, hopefully supporting your back and not and advocating for you as opposed to against you in a situation like this. We all know that the COVID-19 crisis has created a lot of uncertainty in both public and private markets. And with that, we do have relief funding coming out. One thing we want to do with this round of relief is build on the success that we've had in previous rounds. Here in Arkansas, that success totals over $4.4 billion in funding through SBA directly to applicants in round 1 and 2 of the original Paycheck Protection Program, as well as the Economic Injury Disaster Loan. That's the direct SBA loan to our hard-hit businesses and eligible nonprofits, as well as those EIDL advance grants that SBA distributed. That number, 4.4 billion, doesn't begin to look at the relief we also extended out during our Debt Relief Act in order to support small businesses with existing SBA loans and help increase liquidity in their market. We know that that increase in liquidity are going to help these businesses survive throughout the pandemic. Again, building on that success, one thing we want to make sure we do in this round of PPP funding is help to reach those hard-hit small businesses, those underserved entrepreneurs and micro businesses that may not have had access in the first round of Paycheck Protection Program. And we want to make sure we hit those underserved businesses in low to moderate income areas, women-owned small businesses, veteran-owned small businesses, and minority small businesses that may not have had a lender willing to process or able to process their application in the initial. One thing I do want to communicate to our audience out there is there is ample funding in this round of PPP. The new authorization sets relief funding at $806.5 billion throughout its various means in order to help create liquidity and provide access to capital so our businesses and nonprofits can continue to operate and keep their individuals employed and food on the tables for so many Arkansas individual families. The Paycheck Protection Program first draw is currently open through our CFIs or community financial institutions around the state. I've got Claudia Wilson here with me today, who is going to give you an overview of our Economic Aid Act and those individual components of this act and how it's going to impact our eligible applicants moving forward. Claudia has been with our team since COVID began, and she's essential in getting this communication out to us and will be a great option to keep updated with us moving forward. I do want to make sure that all attendees on this do sign up for our Gov delivery to keep up with the changes as they happen. Of course, once legislation is enacted, it's still up to SBA to create policy and procedures and enact that legislation into actionable items. So every day we have new changes and do expect new information coming out on a regular basis. So please make sure you subscribe to our Gov delivery as linked below in the slide, and make sure you do attend our webinars as we continuously update you with all the essential changes. Again, thank you to the Better Business Bureau, Friday Eldredge and Clark, for hosting this today, and I'll turn it over to Claudia Wilson to get in with today's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you for the introduction, Edward. Good morning, everyone. I'm thrilled to be able to speak with you all about the newest legislation that will help so many businesses here in the state of Arkansas and nationwide. The name of this new legislation is Economic Aid to Hard-Hit Small Businesses, Nonprofits, and Venues. This is the most up-to-date information that the SBA has on these programs. If you look at the bottom of this slide, there's a link that can allow you to sign up for the latest updates from the SBA. You will simply navigate to www.sba.gov/updates and can be added to our mailing list. There are many changes to our programs and new additions that I'm going to very briefly discuss today. Keep in mind that some of these programs are not yet open, and we do not have additional guidance at this time for these programs. As this information becomes available, such as when the programs will open or how to apply, we will send out updates and continue providing webinars to the public with in-depth information. First, I will discuss the programs that are currently available. The Economic Injury Disaster Loan, or EIDL, is one loan that has been available for nearly the entire pandemic. This loan is to be used for your working capital needs, expenses, and certain other bills that could have been paid if this disaster had not occurred. The SBA recently extended the deadline to apply for this loan until December 31st of 2021. Please keep in mind that this is a loan and it will need to be repaid. You can borrow up to $150,000 depending on your financial needs and qualifications. The interest rate is 3.75% for small businesses and 2.75% for nonprofits, and you will have 30 years to repay this loan. If you decide to pay this loan off early, you will not face any prepayment penalties or fees. To apply for this loan, you simply go to sba.gov and you will navigate to the COVID relief, and you can access the application on the next page. The next program that I will talk about is called the Paycheck Protection Program First Draw Loans. You may remember that the Paycheck Protection Program opened early last year and ended in August. The PPP loans were fully forgivable if you use the funds primarily to keep your employees employed. This new program is very similar. To be eligible for the PPP first draw loan, there are a few rules. You must have been in business prior to February 15th of 2020. You must use these funds for approved purposes, and you must meet all other eligibility, such as size and type of business, to receive the funds. Applications open this week, and programs will be accepting applications until March 31st of 2021. Please note that if you received a PPP loan back in August, you will not be eligible to apply for the PPP first draw loans. The program that is opening today is called the Paycheck Protection Program second draw loan. This is for borrowers who did receive a PPP last year and are needing an additional loan to help them maintain employees during the pandemic. This program has the same general terms as your previous PPP loan, but it does have some additional eligibility criteria. Namely, you cannot employ more than 300 people. You must be able to show a 25% reduction in gross receipts when you compare 2019 quarters to 2020 quarters. And you must use or have used your entire loan from the previous loan for authorized uses. The SBA is dedicated to providing access for minority, underserved, veteran, and women-owned business concerned who did not receive a PPP loan prior to August 8th of 2020 first. They are also opening PPP second draw loans directly to these borrowers first. To accomplish this, the PPP first draw loan applications and second draw loan applications will be available for the first several days from participating CFIs, which include community development financial institutions, minority depository institutions, certified development companies, and microloan intermediaries. SBA's lender match tool will also direct borrower inquiries to these CFIs. PPP first draw and second draw loans will begin being available to other businesses in the next several days to weeks. Lastly, the Economic Aid Act calls for a repeal of the EIDL advance deduction. If you received both a PPP prior to August 8th of 2020 and you received an EIDL advance, which was the grant portion of the EIDL that was deposited directly into your account, you may remember that your PPP forgiveness amount was reduced by the amount of the advance that you received. You then had to begin making payments on that remaining PPP loan. This will no longer be the case. Additionally, if you already applied for forgiveness, you will be made whole. The SBA is currently processing this refund, and there is nothing that borrowers need to do at this time. As I stated before, there are some programs written in the law that we simply do not have guidance on. One of these changes is presented on this slide. You may be able to apply for a PPP loan increase if you received a PPP loan in 2020. However, this is firmly targeted to farmers and seasonal businesses that calculated their payroll incorrectly. Most businesses will still need to apply for a PPP second draw loan because they will not be eligible for an increase. As we have more guidance, we will have webinars on this particular topic. There is also a grant program that is part of the new legislation, and this is called the Shuttered Venues Operators Grant. This grant is for shuttered live venues, theaters, museums, and zoos who can show at least a 25% reduction in revenues. The hardest hit businesses will be eligible first with a 90% reduction in revenues, and then the program will open up to the next tier. We're awaiting more guidance on this as well. If you have a traditional SBA loan in good standing, you may qualify for the extension of debt relief that was previously available under the CARES Act. This debt relief will include SBA paying 3 months of principal and interest payments up to $9,000 per borrower per month, After that initial 3-month period, the hardest hit and underserved businesses may be eligible to receive an additional 5 months of principal and interest payments, also capped at $9,000 per borrower per month. This is going to be applicable to our 7A, our 504, and our microloan programs. I spoke briefly about the EIDL Advance earlier in the slides. This program provided $1,000 per eligible W-2 employee up to $10,000. This does not have to be repaid, and it's essentially a grant. The new targeted EIDL Advance will allow certain businesses in low-income areas who received less than $10,000 to be made whole up to a total of $10,000. This means that if you qualify and you only receive $2,000, you should receive a second payment of $8,000 after this program is implemented. The targeted EIDL Advance will also supply grants of $10,000 to eligible businesses in low-income areas who missed the previous deadline and did not receive any EIDL Advance. The new emergency EIDL Advance extends the covered period through December 31st of 2021, allows for more flexibility for the SBA to verify an applicant's information, and gives SBA up to 21 days to approve and disperse these advances. Finally, there are a few changes to our traditional non-disaster related programs. For our 7A loans, the loan guarantee will temporarily increase to 90% until October 1st of 2021, and the express loan amount will increase to $1 million until that time as well. For our 504 loans, there will be reciprocity for refinancing between 7A and 504 loans, and a 504 express loan program will be created until September 30th of 2023 to help quickly process 504 loans of less than $500,000. The microloan program, which provides small loans of up to $50,000, will be increasing access to small loans and technical assistance and temporarily increasing the maturity dates for these loans from 6 to 8 years. Also, our 8A business development program will allow businesses to receive an enrollment extension of 1 year. Once again, the SBA is rolling out these programs over the next several weeks, and this is the most current information that we have. The SBA Arkansas District Office will be holding informational webinars to go more in detail on these programs, and we will be sending out email reminders as more information becomes available. Please feel free to use the link on slide number 16 to sign up for these updates. And once again, that's going to be www.sba.gov/updates. Our direct contact information is included here as well. You can call us at 501-324-7379, email us at arkansas_do@sba.gov, and follow us on Twitter at SBA_Arkansas. We also want your feedback. Please go to sba.gov/feedback to let us know how we are doing and to give us suggestions on things that we can do better to serve our Arkansas businesses. Finally, we have what are called our resource partners. These partners provide free assistance with nearly any aspect of your business, no matter where you are in your business life cycle. This can include applying for these programs. If you want to find your local office, go to sba.gov/local assistance to search for a resource partner near you. However, if you are located in the state of Arkansas, slide 19 has the contact information for all of our wonderful partners, or you can reach out to us and we can give you that information as well. And with that, thank you so much to all of our small businesses in Arkansas and to the Better Business Bureau for hosting this event and inviting us to join. I am done with my part of the program, and I am available for Q&A if anyone has any questions.
Okay, thank you, Claudia and Edward. To our participants, please remember to type your questions into the chat box. We will have a Q&A session at the end. And I see there's a lot of questions, so we'll have a lot of material to try and get to today. So I want to welcome Catherine Campbell and Madeline McElhannon from Friday, Eldredge and Clark. Catherine Campbell is an associate in the litigation practice group at Friday, Eldredge and Clark. She serves as litigation counsel for individuals and businesses in complex business and commercial disputes, including employment claims, collective action, wage and hour claims, and breach of contract matters.
Great. Thank you so much, Janet. And thanks to the Better Business Bureau for hosting this important webinar and for inviting us to participate. And thank you also to the SBA and to Claudia for that very helpful information in the first half of this presentation. My colleague Maddie and I are now going to be talking about loan forgiveness. We have been helping clients navigate the PPP loan program since March and April when the program first rolled out. And we have learned that loan forgiveness is a major topic and a major source of questions for folks. So we hope that this issue and topic will be helpful for you all. The new act and the guidance that just came out in the last week or so address loan forgiveness, and they make some changes to forgiveness, which we will discuss. But we are still expecting guidance, as Claudia said earlier, and we do expect some of this guidance to address the forgiveness aspects as well. And so just be aware that things are continuing to evolve in this space, and so continue to monitor this area for updates. So as Claudia mentioned, the Economic Aid Act was passed into law at the end of the year in December 2020, and it made some changes to the PPP loan program with respect to forgiveness. Now, these changes to forgiveness that we're going to talk about, they will affect any new PPP loans or the second draw PPP loans that Claudia spoke about with respect to forgiveness, and it will also affect previously issued loans that have not, where borrowers have not yet applied for forgiveness. So just keep that in mind as we walk through these changes. So the first major change is that stimulus bill added 4 categories of expenses that are now eligible for forgiveness. So like I said, the stimulus bill adds 4 categories of expenses that are eligible for forgiveness under the PPP program. So as you may remember, the previous PPP loan proceeds under the CARES Act, you could use those for payroll, rent, mortgage interest payments, utilities, and interest payments on other debt obligations. And those types of payments would be forgiven, assuming you met some of the other qualifications. So now 4 other categories of expenses have been added to that list, and I'll walk through those. The first is operations expenses, and those are payments for any business software or cloud computing software that you would use for business operations. So this would be something like payroll software, accounting software, or things that you use to track your inventory. The second category of expenses is supplier costs. And these are expenditures that a borrower made for goods that were essential to the business, and they were made pursuant to a contract that was already in effect prior to the applicable covered loan period. So these are basically outstanding orders for essential supplies that borrowers had before the covered period started. The third category of expenses that is now included as forgivable expenses are worker protection expenses. And these are expenditures that businesses made to comply with the Department of Health, the CDC, and the OSHA guidelines to help businesses protect their workers against COVID-19 and the spread of COVID-19. So these would be things implemented to comply with sanitation requirements, social distancing requirements, that type of thing. Examples of this would be renovating spaces to allow 6 feet in between workers, new ventilation or filtration systems, erecting barriers and shields, and purchasing PPE for employees. So those will all now be forgivable. The fourth and final category is certain property damage costs. And these are costs related to property damage and vandalization that occurred due to public disturbances in 2020 that would not otherwise be covered by insurance or compensation. So that's just something to keep in mind as you're working with your PPP loan. And as a reminder, 60% of the PPP loan proceeds still do need to be spent on payroll in order to qualify for full forgiveness. But these categories are just things that would also fall within that bucket of forgiveness once you meet that threshold requirement. So as I said, the new stimulus bill passed at the end of last year made some changes to the forgiveness program. And the second major change that it made was to change the covered period. So under the previous CARES Act, the covered period or the forgiveness window was really an either or question. Borrowers could choose an 8-week window or a 24-week window. And now borrowers get to choose that covered period anywhere between the 8-week and 24-week period. So it provides more flexibility to borrowers to set the length of the covered period, both respect to PPP loan forgiveness and with respect to employee count, as that goes into certain forgiveness items as well that Maddie will address. Third, and Claudia addressed this in detail, so I won't go into much detail on it, but third, it changed the way that disaster loans are treated for forgiveness purposes. So as Claudia said, under the CARES Act, the SBA was required to deduct that advance amount that is given on disaster loans from the total forgiveness payment amount. And the new stimulus bill changes that. And so now the borrower is entitled to that EIDL amount as well as to their PPP forgiveness amount. And as she said, SBA would be refunding amounts as well that have already been taken away from the forgiveness amount. So I think she covered that probably in better detail than I did, but just as a reminder that that is one other way that forgiveness has been changed. The fourth way that forgiveness has changed, and perhaps probably the most important that we're seeing for our clients, is that the Act reverses prior IRS guidance and provides significant tax relief to PPP borrowers. So under the CARES Act, the forgiven loan amount was not treated as taxable income, and we always knew that. But the IRS had put out guidance last year that said business expenses that were paid using the forgiven funds would not be deductible. The new act changes that. So now businesses can go forward with certainty that they can deduct the business expenses, including payroll, if they use that PPP money to pay those expenses. So now we are sure that you can claim normal tax deductions for business expenses paid with PPP money, which is good news. The fifth and final thing that I'll talk about in terms of how the new stimulus bill changed forgiveness is that it has allowed for a new streamlined forgiveness application for all PPP loans under $150,000. It's estimated that around 3/4 of all PPP loans made so far are for $150,000 or less. So this is welcome relief to many borrowers. And in essence, what the new act requires is a new process to be a certification of no more than 1 page for anybody who borrowed less than this amount. There are some items specified in the act that must be included in that 1 page, such as the employees who were retained, the estimated amount spent on payroll, and an attestation of compliance with the PPP loan requirements. But otherwise, it will be a 1-page, pretty simple process, which I think will be welcome relief and good news to many of our clients. So now I will turn it over to Maddie to dig in a little bit more on the details of loan forgiveness.
Thanks, Katie. So like Katie was saying, the Economic Aid Act made several changes to loan forgiveness for PPP loans. However, there are quite a few eligibility requirements that carry over from the original CARES Act. So we thought it would be beneficial to walk through those requirements as well. So the full amount of your loan, both principal amount and any accrued interests, are eligible for forgiveness. But you must meet certain eligibility requirements. These eligibility requirements really boil down to 4 things. At least 60% of your loan amount must be used for approved payroll costs. And the SBA has issued guidance that identifies what qualifies as a payroll cost. Up to 40% of your loan amount can be spent on eligible non-payroll costs. These have been things like mortgage interest, rent, utility payments, or interest on debt incurred before February 15th, 2020. It now also includes the additional expenses that Katie outlined right before. Employers must have, in good faith, maintained similar levels of employment and salary. And when considering a forgiveness application, any reductions in employees or salary can impact the amount of forgiveness. And the funds of your PPP loan must be spent during your applicable covered period. Like Katie explained earlier, the covered period has also been adjusted by the Economic Aid Act. If some of these requirements are partially met, partial forgiveness is available for borrowers. So if you're applying for forgiveness, or if you're in the process of applying for forgiveness, we have many clients that have had questions concerning their applications. Once a borrower has used all of the proceeds from their PPP loan, they're eligible to apply for forgiveness, and the borrower should reach out to their PPP lender to discuss the proper application. There are several applications for different types of borrowers. There's a 3508, a 3508EZ, and a 3508S. Your lender can assist you with filling out the proper application. Borrowers can apply for forgiveness at any time up until the maturity date of their loan. If a borrower received an SBA loan number prior to June 5th, they have a maturity date of 2 years. And if the SBA loan number was issued after June 5th, the maturity for those loans is 5 years. As long as borrowers submit an application within 10 months following their covered period, they will not be required to make PPP loan payments to their lender. So after your covered period lapses, if a forgiveness application is not filed within those 10 months, there will be obligations to start making payments on the PPP loan. And until further guidance comes out from the SBA, we'll continue to use forgiveness applications that are already available. Many borrowers have pending forgiveness applications and questions concerning that. So there are a few things we think that might be beneficial for you to know. First is that the SBA has full authority and discretion to review forgiveness applications for several reasons. They might look at and evaluate the borrower's eligibility. They might assess whether or not the original loan amount was proper. They may look at the use of funds to make sure they meet the eligibility requirements. And they may review the amount of the forgiveness that is requested by the application. If your loan is under a formal review by the SBA, you will receive a notification either from the SBA itself or from your lender. If this notice has not been given to you and your loan is under review and you apply for a second draw PPP loan, you will receive notice that your original loan is under review at that time. Any PPP loan that was made prior to the Economic Aid Act that is under review will need to be resolved before that borrower is eligible to receive a second draw PPP loan. I think it is worth noting that there is an appeal process in place for a borrower who believes that SBA has erred in its review, but that borrower must have received a final answer decision from the SBA before they can initiate that process. There's also a process in place to request an SBA review if your lender has denied your forgiveness application for a variety of reasons. We also want to encourage borrowers who have had pending forgiveness applications for longer than 180 days to reach out to their lender or a contact at the SBA to verify that the forgiveness application is still pending and that there is not a formal review underway. Now we wanted to move into forgiveness on the second draw PPP loans that Claudia mentioned earlier. Second draw PPP loans are eligible for loan forgiveness on the same terms and conditions that first draw PPP loans are. So the requirements that we mentioned earlier, 60% payroll costs, up to 40% eligible non-payroll costs, funds used during the cover period, and borrowers maintaining employees are all relevant to your forgiveness for your second draw PPP loan as well. Lenders can decide whether or not to extend second draw PPP loans to borrowers who have original PPP loans that are still pending forgiveness. If a borrower did not receive full forgiveness in their first PPP loan, this may present some problems for a second draw PPP loan. In the second draw PPP loan application, a borrower must certify that all of the first draw PPP loans were used as an eligible use of proceeds. If a borrower cannot make that representation, they will not be eligible to apply for a second draw PPP loan. And as it's been mentioned, there is going to be a simplified forgiveness process attached to second draw PPP loans. And the one notable thing is that, for forgiveness sake, is that loans that are under $150,000 will not have to present documentation of a 25% revenue reduction at the time of the application for a second draw PPP loan, but they will be required to present that documentation when they are applying for forgiveness. And it is up to lenders to decide what type of documentation satisfies their good faith requirement to look into the 25% revenue reduction. And as we've mentioned several times, more SBA guidance is forthcoming, particularly on forgiveness. And we anticipate the SBA to provide updated or new forgiveness applications in the near future.
Thanks so much to the presenters. We are ready for some questions and answers right now. The first question that I had, are there resources in Spanish?
There are going to be some resources in Spanish. You can find that online. Go ahead and send an email to us at that Arkansas_DO@SBA.gov, and we will make sure that we get those resources sent out. But they should be available online.
Thank you so much. Claudia, are there any options for businesses that started after the pandemic for funding?
As of right now, the deadline, you had to have been in business as of February 15th of 2020 to be eligible for the programs. And that's the information that we have available right now. You can always try to look into any state programs or grants on like grants.gov to see if you might be eligible for other funding options, or you can look into one of our traditional loan programs. But generally, you are going to have been in business as of February 15th of 2020.
Thank you. This question is for Maddie. Are there any tax issues as a result of receiving PPP funds for 2020?
Well, as Katie discussed earlier, and Katie, you may want to jump in on this. Tax issues is kind of a broad question, but now the PPP loan funds that you have received, expenses that you make with those loan proceeds are now tax deductible. I'm not sure if that fully answers the question, but that is the new guidance from the Economic Aid Act.
Okay, thank you. Okay, our revenue for 2 quarters did not decrease, but actually increased. The full year was decreased by 31.6%. Would we qualify for this loan package?
So I'm assuming that they're talking specifically about that PPP second draw. So it's going to be those comparable quarters. So you would compare quarter 1 of 2019 to quarter 1 of 2020. So that's what you're looking at, is those comparable quarters. You can always work with one of our resource partners to see if that would work, or speak to your lender directly. Of course, they're the ones who are going to make the initial decision on whether or not you are eligible for these programs. So it's always worth it to reach out to them directly, and also to take advantage of those free resources we have available.
Thank you. Are there any funds allocated for startups right now?
There are no pandemic funds that are eligible for startups at the moment as far as pandemic programs, but we have our regular loan programs such as our 7A and our microloans that do fund startups. And you can just give us a call at 501-324-7379. We have a great email list of just information that you would need as far as creating a business plan, reaching out to those resource partners, and where you can apply for one of those loans.
Are nonprofits eligible at this time?
Certain nonprofits are going to be eligible. I believe that's going to be an 501c3, 501c6, 501c19. I would have to look at the legislation to see which all are eligible, but several types of nonprofits are eligible.
When will the covered period begin for this round of PPP loans?
So generally, the covered period, as Madeline had stated before, the covered period is going to be selected by the borrower themselves. So when you receive the funds, you get to choose how long you need to use those funds, whether that be 8 or 24 weeks. So if you can use all of the funds in 8 weeks for the appropriate purposes, by all means do so. If you need a little bit more time, you can select that 24 weeks. But generally, it's going to start once you receive the funds or at the beginning of your payroll cycle that's applicable.
Okay. When calculating for the second round of PPP loans for payroll, do you avoid the payroll periods already covered with the first PPP loan?
I am going to ask you to go ahead and send that question to us because that's something that I need to look into. I definitely don't want to speak on something that I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay. Then we have a question from folks that are doing the personal services category, hair salons. Do they qualify for 5 additional months of assistance regarding their current 7A loans?
Okay, so with the 7A loans, that's going to obviously, and now this is legislation at this point. We don't have a whole lot of guidance. We don't have any NAICS codes that are associated with that at this time. So that's really going to depend on their definition of what an underserved community is. Of course, the 3 months is going to be automatic, and the additional 5 months after that is going to be dependent on that legislation that we get later down the line.
Do we know when the second draw loans will be available for application for traditional lenders?
We do not know at this time. We are still awaiting guidance. Of course, we're trying to increase that access for minority, underserved, veteran, women-owned businesses at this point because they need the help as far as getting the help with the small businesses, and they were maybe underserved on the PPP previously. So we definitely want to make sure that they get the first pick at this. Once we have that information available, we are going to send out those Gov delivery updates, which are our emails that we send out. So just go to sba.gov/AR or /updates, and you can look on there and look at all of the webinars we have available, and you can sign up for our updates. Once we have information, we'll send those emails out.
And that will have a list of lenders as well, right?
As of right now, we do not have a list of lenders. Of course, lenders have the choice to either participate or not participate. And of course, some are going to want to provide PPP loans only to the people that currently have accounts with them. So as of right now, we do not have that list. But that's pending, and we will get that information out as soon as we have it.
Okay, so if you're not a minority or veteran business, just to clarify, they will have to wait until traditional lenders are available to process loans?
Okay. That is correct. If you do not meet one of those underserved categories, you would have to wait.
Okay. So going back to the EIDL advance, could you provide clarity on who would receive this?
So the information, of course, as far as the repeal of the EIDL advance deduction, that's going to be automatic across the board. However, as far as some of these things, now we have this legislation, but that doesn't mean that we have the specific guidelines as far as who will receive what. That's going to depend on when the guidance comes down, what they clarify that definition of underserved is. And once we have that guidance, we'll be able to, of course, have those webinars and discuss it more in detail. But as of right now, there's not really a whole lot of clarification I can give.
Okay. If you were in business before February of 2020 and you are going to build out and get started for 6 months, and you had ordered and paid for equipment, but due to COVID-19, your equipment was delayed. You've made some income in 2020, but the pandemic hurt your sales in 2020. Are you eligible for applying for EIDL?
I would reach out to the resource partners in this case. Of course, the economic injury disaster loan you would apply for online. In that situation, definitely go ahead and either give us a call or speak to them. It's really going to depend on the financial situation of your business, whether you were considered in business, and whether or not you can prove that you had that economic injury, as they call it.
With the EIDL, is any of that forgivable?
The economic injury disaster loan, if you sign loan documents when you apply for this loan, and it wasn't just directly deposited into your account, that is not going to be forgivable. Now, the advance is a separate portion of it. It's a little confusing, but that is the grant portion of the economic injury disaster loan, and that is not does not have to be repaid. But if you sign loan documents, it has to be repaid.
Okay. What are the repayment terms for the second draw PPP loan? Is it a monthly principal and interest, or a single pay, or is there a deferment period?
So you're going to need to speak to your lender directly regarding that. Of course, as of right now, we have very limited information. This just opened. Generally, with the previous PPP, of course, if you didn't meet all of the forgiveness guidelines, then it was deferred for up until you applied for forgiveness. And the terms were 1% interest rate compounding annually, I believe.
Okay, and we do have a question about getting more than one EIDL loan. Our business is eligible for that.
As of right now, and now I don't know if there's anyone else on the call from SBA who might be able to provide more clarification if Edward's still on, but to my knowledge, the EIDL, the actual loan portion, is just that one bite at the apple. So if you received an EIDL, you would not just be able to reapply. They would kick your application out for duplicity at this time.
Okay, and to clarify, if you did not receive full forgiveness, are you eligible for the second round on the PPP?
That is something that we are still looking at. To my knowledge, you had to have used those funds for approved purposes to be eligible for the forgiveness. But of course, a lot of people weren't eligible based on the fact that they had an EIDL advance that they had to repay. So that's something that we're still waiting on that future guidance on.
Yeah, Claudia, I would just add that the certifications on the second draw PPP application that was put out on Monday by the SBA does require a certification that all first draw PPP loan proceeds were used for eligible expenses. So that is just something to keep in mind.
Right. And thank you, Madeline. I really appreciate you jumping in with that. That is one thing that you do have to certify. But of course, as I said, if you receive that EIDL advance, you might not have received complete forgiveness. So it's definitely something that it's going to depend on the situation.
So Madeline, can you talk a little bit about the deadline for the loan forgiveness, and how do businesses start? What kinds of receipts and things do they need to make sure that they have?
I think the best advice would be to contact your lender. Keep communication open with them. They can provide you with the proper application for your loan. As we said earlier, you have until the maturity date of your PPP loan to apply for forgiveness. But if you do not apply for forgiveness within 10 months of the end of your covered period, you will be required to start making payments.
Thank you. If you receive $2,000 on EIDL advance, will you automatically receive the balance up to $10,000?
So that is something that I touched on. And of course, this is one of those programs that's in the legislation and hasn't come out yet. And what it states is that some borrowers who receive the EIDL advance will receive that up to the $10,000 if they're in an underserved area, if they're in an underserved community or category. So we're still awaiting guidance on that. So I can't say for sure that you would be eligible, but it is a potential.
Okay. When you talk about underserved communities and minority-owned businesses, can you provide a little bit more clarification of how that's defined?
So as far as underserved, women-owned, minorities, these are going to be people who are generally in some sort of protected class. They're going to meet those guidelines if you're a veteran or you're a woman and you own more than 51% of that business. So it's going to be people who have those barriers to getting help generally.
What is the best documentation to demonstrate the 25% reduction? You talked about looking at 2019 to 2020, but can you expound on that a little bit more?
I can to an extent. Now, and I've said this before, when it comes to the PPP loans, the banks are the ones who are going to make the initial decision. So you have to provide the proof that is sufficient to the bank. They're what's called they're delegated lenders. So they can make these decisions on behalf of the SBA as long as they're part of our SBA approval. So what you would need to do is talk to your bank directly, see what they would ask you to provide, but generally you're going to have to provide tax documents, payroll, things of that nature, anything that you can provide that shows that decline.
Okay, thank you. Is the second PPP for expenses in 2020 or is it for 2021?
So those are going to be for expenses during that covered period. So generally, to be forgiven for the loan, it has to be during that covered period with few exceptions. So it's going to be that payroll during that 8 or that 24-week covered period. At least 60%, of course, has to be used for payroll. And then the other eligible expenses up to 40%, but generally during that covered period.
Okay. We were excluded and weren't able to make payroll for 4 quarters in 2020. We had several employees, but they worked unpaid. Do we qualify?
Now, if you received the PPP previously, then that sounds like you would need to apply for the PPP second draw. Now, you're going to need to work with your lender to see if you would be qualified in that case. On a case-by-case basis, the best thing to do is going to be to reach out to your lender directly.
Well, I think that we've gotten most of the questions answered, and we're going to go ahead and start wrapping up here. I'm going to turn it back over to Janet.
Thank you, Tina. And I want to thank our presenters today from the Small Business Administration, Arkansas District Office, as well as Friday Eldredge and Clark. We will be sending follow-up information with answers to questions that we might not have gotten to today. You'll also be receiving information about future webinars and links for additional information. I want to take a minute and give a special shout out and thanks to Tina Hunter. She's the Executive Director of our Better Business Bureau of Arkansas Education Foundation. Thank you for your tireless efforts in coordinating our presenters today, in helping to provide this much needed information to businesses in Arkansas, and for keeping your finger on the pulse of what businesses need as we go forward. We'll have other webinars and informational opportunities for you later on. So I want to thank everybody. Thank you again to our presenters. thank everyone for joining us this morning. Look for information that we will send you as a follow-up. Go to bbb.org for additional resources. Better Business Bureau is here to help. It's what we do. Thank you for joining us, and you have a good day. Bye-bye.